Okay, I can't wait any longer. Had a long break from gaming because of my cough, but I need to get some things played. So this is another Victory Point Games game that I was given a chance to look at as a review copy. Fleets 2025 East China Sea. I didn't see that. Maybe I should play that. What this is a representation of a hypothetical situation, which is very likely with China building up their claims, their navy, and of course their air power over the East China Sea, trying to make, their own little economic prosperity sphere, if you like. Nah, but it's nearby territory that they want to have greater influence over. There's some very weird things about this game. First of all, since it's hypothetical, the weapon systems, etc., in it don't really exist yet. They're a little in the future. Now, I used to buy all the old Cold War games, the Fleet games, although those are mostly recent purchases for me. Victory Games came out with a lot of these, NATO. Flashpoint Golan is one of them, but that's not really on that. I'm looking for things like Central America. I've got them probably hidden up here, the Strike games. I also had the SPI Hofgap. I have that whole series, I think everything they made of it, which comes to, I think, 5 games. It's supposed to be like 7 or 9 or 11 or something. Yeah, it was supposed to cover the whole continent, basically, now. But the area covered by NATO was going to be covered by it. And it always kind of excited me in the abstract, but the actuality of it sometimes was fun, sometimes wasn't. This is, most of those games were based on, hey, what do we have now? What would happen if there was a war in the next couple of years? This is more extended out, not to the extent that something like Invasion America is, where it's completely silly. This is a reasonable projection of a war, and a guesstimate as to weapon systems, which doesn't really matter too much, except that it gives China a much bigger navy. It's got some very, very odd mechanisms in it for a naval game, which we'll see. Things like zones of control that are locking, and which immediately when I saw it, I said, whoa, that's going to be a weird, does that even fit navies? After reading through the rules, I haven't played yet, and we're going to play and see how well that works. I've got a little bit more hope for it. That this kind of usage actually will work out well at a high level simulation like this. Component wise, these little charts, player aids, whatever, keep track of the planes on the carriers. National will, which is how you win and lose the game. How many cards you can have. Yes, it comes with a whole bunch of cards. This is basically a CDG at heart. Full naval CDG. And it's got some odd mechanisms to handle how you move and not. And then, obviously the counters, a whole bunch of counters ranging. They are double-sided. Man, that doesn't help. They're double-sided in that they show, the type of the actual element that you're dealing with, but on the back there's a dummy side so that things can move around hidden, and then there's a hidden side. And then there's these dummy counters, which are, used on the other side with informational counters. Kind of nice use of counters. By the way, this is the more typical Victory Point Games counter sheets. The last 2 games, one was that I looked at out of this package. One was Cruel Necessity, which is this beautiful laser cut counters and everything. And then the other one was the Franco-Prussian War 40, which it looked like they were having trouble with the counter production. This is the more usual. You had a few little scraps of this stuff coming off of it, but no big deal at all. Actually, fairly decent counters. I've always liked their counters when they come out. Okay, and here the game says it has no dice, but here's the sneeze dice that I talk about every now and then. All right, I've been kind of dreading getting to the rules because I read them a couple of weeks ago and I've mostly forgotten them. And I don't want to reread them. I don't have the focus to do that again, but I'm going to do it with you. All right, let's look at what the values on a counter are if we can. Let's see, we got them here. So this is the range that they can attack, and the 0 indicates basically no weapons, no offensive weaponry on an item. And for a carrier, that largely makes sense. You have the unit type up here. And then you have pretty standard, what is it, an attack, movement allowance on the actual units. Let's see, do I have any planes here? I should have some planes pulled out for the carriers at least. Planes have a white movement allowance, and in fact, our dummy has a movement allowance on it as well. And they're all pretty generic, so all planes have a movement allowance of 4, so you're not able to tell whether it's a real plane or what kind of plane it is. Okay. The map itself is separated into deep water and shallow hexes, and of course land hexes. Let's see what else we have here. The cards have their number up here, the operations value here. It's called orders value, just because every CDG has to come up with new terms for things. I mean, it fits the spirit of the game better, and I guess that's not so bad because you're used to what it is. Simple title here, and some effects if played as an event, and you're going to have a choice to play these as for their points or for the event. Okay. Oh, the dice along the side are battle or search dice values. That's the number of dice you're going to roll for something. Blue dice are for the blue player, the US, and red are for the Communist Chinese. And you're allowed to play the card for 4 different types of uses. So you're allowed to play the card for the orders during your action phase, essentially, for the event, or in order to help you in order to allow you to make a search, or in order to bonus you in battle. And those dice are a part of the analysis on the card. So basically you have the 3 things on your card that determine how valuable it is. What the event is, what the operations value is, and what the dice value is. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let's see if I can. I'm having trouble here. We have a sequence of play here, which starts off with reinforcements. Both players are going to just place any reinforcements due. Then both players get to move, It's not simultaneous, sequential. And then we're going to be doing an action phase. This is where the cards come in, where you could play for searches, events. You can move units based on the orders. You can attack with your orders. And you just keep doing this. After you do the searches and events, you keep playing orders as long as you have the desire and opportunity to do so. And then we go to the special air unit movement phase where you're trying to fly your planes back to base, basically. Actually, maybe it's something else because we have this air unit basing phase. You check your stacking limitations. Stacking, I believe, is 3 surface units, 2 air units, and 1 submarine in the same hex. And we'll get into, there is some stacking of opposing units, but not of the same type. So if you have surface units in a hex, your opponent's not going to have surface units in that hex. I believe air units of one player can coexist with submarine units of the other player. I think that's the only case where you're allowed to have units of different players in the same hex. Okay. When reinforcements come on, they come on in stealth mode or hidden fashion. Yeah, this is why I wasn't going to do this, why I haven't done it for so long. My cough has been worse, but, I mean, I kind of wish I hadn't committed to doing this next, but it's where I am. Okay, aircraft carriers have little spaces where you put the different planes. And the specific planes that are listed here are the setup units. You're allowed to have any 3 planes or any 4 planes on a carrier. And those don't count against stacking in the hex. They're on board the plane. You're allowed to launch planes or land them during the player's movement at any time. So the carrier has a combat value. That's essentially its defensive value. There are unreasonable situations probably in the game where some things would have a better offensive than defensive value, perhaps. That's not represented here, but that's okay. Each unit has a movement allowance, which is basically how many hexes it's allowed to move. You move the units hex by hex in any wherever you want to go. Submarine and ships can't enter land hexes. Aircraft can. Units have to stop when they enter adjacent to an enemy unit. And they can't... trying to see if they can leave. You can't enter enemy hexes. Subs and aircraft don't need to stop and can enter and remain in a hex with enemy units of the other type. Yeah. So their zones don't affect one another. We've got that stacking limit I talked about. Okay. Each unit can only move once in any given opportunity to move, but there may have more opportunities to move than are indicated. So, for example, everything can move in the movement phase. Units that have orders from a card are allowed to move in the orders event phase. And aircraft have another chance to move during the aircraft movement phase to make it back to their bases or whatever. Okay. During the action phase, first you get to search, then you can trigger event, just one, and then you can activate groups of various units. So in order to do a search, the first thing, you play a card for each search attempt. And then after you've done all your searches, you must play one event from your hand. If you don't have one, if you don't have a card left, well, then you're done with your action phase, essentially, because you don't have any orders either. Oh no, you must play a card. And you can use it either as the event or the action. See here it says conduct event is over here. But and it looks like you're only allowed to do one order, except here it says differently. You know, I had questions about this back when I read it. And, all right, we'll see if we can find out the answer as we go through. This rule book isn't bad, actually. I'm getting more used to the color in VPG, and there's a lot less highlighting in this. You know, the Cruel Necessity one, it froze my brain completely. But the earlier, most of the VPG stuff is just not as trying to look like Maxim or whatever. I remember the first time I opened up a Modern magazine, I think it was Maxim, some security guard I was working with had it. And it was like, how can you read this? You know, but that goes back to Life. Life was like that too, although not as flashy. But I want columns of text. Obviously, not if I'm looking at half-dressed girls. But there was too much busyness on there for me to pay any attention to them. All right. So where are we? Searches. So you pick a space with enemy flipped over units, stealth units. And then you're allowed to roll a number of dice as indicated on the card for your faction. Hopefully not these tiny ones. I can understand why they put them in. It gives you a playable game. But they stick to my finger, to my creases in my hands. And if you roll less than, let's see, you roll the dice, you take the lowest number rolled among your dice as your search value. If that's less than the movement allowance of any of the stealth markers in the hex, those units, those stealth markers that are less than, and only those stealth, what? If the search value is less than the movement allowance, those stealth markers that are less than, and only those stealth markers are immediately revealed. Otherwise, there's no effect. So that sounds kind of that sounds completely contradictory. So let's see what the example says, because that doesn't make sense. Because it sounds like I want to roll low with the dice to get less than the movement value. But then those stealth markers that are less than are immediately revealed. I don't know what that means. Okay, so here they talk about this. There's an enemy subship and aircraft. It just looks like they weren't clear on it, which is odd. Victory Point Games is usually really good at vetting the rolls. And roll them for a 5 and a 2. The 2 is your search value. It's compared to the stealth markers. It's lower than these things, so those stealth markers are revealed. Okay, so yeah, it's what it sounds like they were trying to do initially, but then they added this thing, those stealth markers that are less than are immediately revealed. Well, no, it's the ones that are greater. The movement allowance being greater. So, yeah, if you have this here and you roll a 2, it'll be revealed. Now, usually there'll be a stack of units in a hex, and they may have different movement allowances. As you see, a stealth sub actually has, for the US, a lower movement allowance than it does on the other side. Interesting. it has to move slower when. The same isn't really true of ships, because subs are noisy when they're running full speed, so they're easier to detect. You can do multiple searches during this step, and you can search the same hex multiple times, and you can do these as long as your cards hold out. You can play the card as an event. Now this is what's weird. Here it says conduct event is one step, but over here it seems to be a little different. Again, it looks like these rules didn't get the attention that VPG usually pays to rules. I thought they read fine when I read them. I had a few questions, but figured they'd resolve themselves. But they're not really doing so, at least at this later date. Some events allow for orders to be issued as well. You read the text on the cards and follow it exactly. Don't make any attempts to interpret. And that's pretty simple. The thing is, it's not clear to me whether or not you can play one or multiple events, because here it says conduct event, and here it seems to indicate that there's more than one. We'll see if it gets any better later on. Okay. When an activity card is played to issue orders, you can issue a number of orders equal to the card's value. An order is used, a single point off the card is used to activate a single unit or all units of the same type in the hex. So you could activate, all of the surface units in a hex, and that includes carriers, I think. Because they look the same on the back. It's not the specific ship class, it's the ordered units will be allowed to move if desired and attack afterwards if desired. If they've done their desired movement in combat, then the next order is issued, and any movement or combat that it engenders is conducted, and then you just keep going until you're out of orders for the turn. If a single order is used to activate multiple units, they must all move to the same destination hex and all attack the same target. A unit can only be given one order per turn. You can't give an order, say, to the ships in one hex and leave one behind and give it another order. All the ships in that hex are given an order. You could leave it behind, but it won't be given another order that turn. Once you've been activated by an order, you're allowed to attack. You must include all the ordered units wishing to attack the designated target hex. The hex can be attacked multiple times by different units, once per order activation, once by different order commands. When attacked, all the revealed enemy units in the target hex must be within each attacking unit's range. The attacker targets a hex with revealed enemy units in it, not the individual units themselves. And the way attack's going to be done is first you check for special combat symbols and cases, whatever that means. Here they are. A white aircraft silhouette. Okay. Well, oh, yeah, that's this. That gets an extra die, a battle die, for each symbol when it's fighting, if there are any enemy air units in the attack that you're attacking. A negated white aircraft thingy. I don't know where those are, but there's going to be a line going through it, essentially. That unit cannot attack exclusively against enemy air units, and they wouldn't count in if there are air units there, I guess. And a negated sub, it can't attack exclusively against enemy submarine units. If units are in stealth mode, they're ignored. They're not going to throw dice, the defending units, nor can they receive damage. The attacking player can't attack a stealth stack. A hex consisting exclusively of submarines can only be targeted if the attacker is in or adjacent to the submarine's hex. You can't use, standoff weaponry underwater. All attacking units that are in stealth mode must be revealed. The defender is allowed to reveal more units in his stack in order to increase his defensive strength. Then each player is allowed to play a card for battle. The attacker first. Both players select an activity card from their hands, and this is going to increase the number of dice that they're going to roll in combat as listed on the card. They place them face down. The attacker makes his declaration that he's going to play first. Excuse me. Oh, shit. The attacker makes his declaration that he's going to play first. Yeah, I can't talk without throwing myself in a coughing fit. And that's going to be the number of extra dice that he gets. Now, both players are going to roll dice equal to their total battle dice of all the revealed units. The combat strength, I guess, is your battle dice. And then this gives you an additional number of dice. There's a buckets of dice system, each 4, 5, or 6 hits. If rolled by the attacker, the defender needs to roll 5s or 6s. Defensive penalty, which is quite fitting if you're discovered at sea. You want to be the person launching the attack, essentially. You subtract the number... Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. 5s and 6s are saves by the defender. You subtract the number of saves rolled by the defender from the number of hits rolled by the attacker. And then the defender takes those hits. If the defender rolls more saves than the attacker rolls hits, he might get a counterattack. If he's within range of the attacker must distribute 1 hit for every complete pair of remaining saves to the attacking units. The defending units must be able to attack, i.e. have a range, at least one of the attacking unit types. And the defenders must be adjacent to hexes containing exclusively attacking subs to counterattack against them. Hits are going to use these damage markers. An air unit is destroyed with 1 hit, but a ship or sub is only damaged, and they take a damage marker. Damage cannot be applied to stealth markers. Second hit will destroy ships or subs. And when a unit's destroyed, it's going to go on the political will track, and we're going to have to look at how that works. It's a little funky, and I don't remember it terribly well. Then aircraft units are allowed to move again. If they have this little airbase counter on them, they need to land on a carrier airbase before the next turn. Now, here's an example of the no plane. This guy's not good against planes. Or can't attack planes. I can't find it. Here's an airbase symbol. Okay, then you go to housekeeping. You see if somebody won. If aircraft are revealed and they have an airbase icon, and they're not in the same hex as a friendly carrier or airbase, they've got a problem. Aircraft that have a white movement allowance are always considered supported. They're always refueled by long-range bombing. They're either long-range bombers or they have refueling planes to support them. If an airplane is unsupported, if it's not in the same hex as a friendly carrier, now they don't have to actually land as far as I can tell. Then they're just destroyed at this point, and they go on your track as a penalty. Oh shit, I gotta plug in. God. Okay. At this point, we also check to make sure you're in the stacking. You're allowed 3 aircraft, 2 ships, and 1 sub. It's possible that there's enemy aircraft and subs in the same hex. Aircraft carriers and aircraft units in a carrier's hangars don't count for stacking. If you're in excess of the stacking penalty, you have to remove units. Those could be dummy units if that's all. If that's what's causing your overstacking. Okay. Now, what we haven't explained is how things show up here, but the decision here is to give the rules on how that affects you before we decide how things get there. So we'll follow the rules, even though they don't make sense ordered the way they are, because I don't remember, them well enough to describe them. If your political will marker ends up stacked with a destroyed unit on your political will track, your opponent immediately wins the game. It's possible that both people will be going into that situation on the same turn. Blue acts first in this step, so in that case, red would win. Then you refresh your hand. Players draw cards until they have whatever their card hand size is. Reshuffling as needed. A stealth marker. We talked about those. Reinforcements start stealthily. The only ways that stealth markers are revealed is through a search, if it attacks, or if the owner decides to reveal it for defensive purposes. Certain units are non-stealthy, the KA-29, and it's going to have... an indication that it's not. It's just a helicopter. Once a thing is revealed, it's not going to rehide. Between satellites, AWACS, all that shit, once you got something, it's going to be real hard to hide it. Subs would be the actual real exception to this. And to tell you the truth, planes too. If planes are rebasing. So if you're playing something like a fleet game, you're not going to maintain detection range. And in fact, in an area this high, even ships can get lost in the fleet games. I think the decision, though, is that satellite tracking is just so good that you wouldn't lose connection. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Planes, if they land and take off again, you don't know that when that happened. You're not going to be tracking them every moment, every plane that exists. You're only tracking the ones that are in the air. Subs can use various techniques to hide, but the game has decided to abstract all that, unless some events allow you to do so. Anyway. The political will track. So blue has 2 little boxes per row, and red has 3. Which just means red has more resilience to losing units. Every time you lose a unit, the destroyed unit is placed at the bottom right of the track on the first available empty box. And you go from right to left and then bottom to top. When casualties fill a row on with your political will marker, you've lost the game. So if this row gets filled for the red, they'd lose. But the will can move around, which we'll see in a moment. As can the hand size. Aircraft carriers. If an aircraft carrier is destroyed, it takes up an entire row. Because it's so important. Okay. Additional rules. I don't know if I read these because they're in a little blue thing, but let's see. Because we want more realism. Yeah. I don't want to play. I want to harpoon these rules, as they put it. Ships that are damaged, because they're structurally designed to take more damage, a surface ship will sink after receiving 3 hits instead of just 2. I'm good with that. USN carriers take 4 hits. Except for the B-2B units, it takes 2 aircraft units to completely fill a box on the political will track. And this is going to reduce the starting political will by 1 for each side. Partway through selecting a scenario, which is why. The B-2B and UCAV may revert back to stealth mode if they begin their movement phase alone in a hex and outside the attack range of revealed enemy units. So this is fixing one of my issues here. The blue player can also add a U.S. aircraft dummy marker to the hex. The CGX cruiser, which I think are just U.S., may revert to stealth mode if they begin movement phase alone in a hex and outside attack range. The blue player can also add a U.S. ship dummy marker to the hex to re-stealth it. Undamaged nuclear submarines, those with an N in their ID, like this one, may revert to stealth mode if they're in deep water. Undamaged diesel submarines can settle on the bottom of shallower water to avoid detection and may revert to stealth mode there. A submarine can only revert back to stealth mode if it's outside the attack range of any revealed enemy units and it expends a movement point to do so. The owning player may also add a submarine dummy to that hex if available when re-stealthing these units. When is this done? Beginning the movement phase. So you would have an opportunity to move and then you wouldn't be overstacked anymore. There's a series of scenarios here. 3 here. And we're going to try the first one here, the training exercise. And I'll go into that as we hit it. But then apparently there's also something I missed. Anything on this one? A bonus campaign scenario, which we'll see. I'm planning on doing more than one of these to get a full feel of this game. All right, let's send this up. And hopefully my coughing wasn't too terrible.